Also very proud to be part of the management committee that has been organizing this 3-year-long project, the Diversity and Inclusion Project. So it's been a great volunteer group. We've worked together to organize 12 different conferences over the course of the year, and we're really proud to bring you the best of, including this panel today, the role of faith in philanthropy and interfaith discussion. So I am just going to introduce our host, our moderator, Muneeb. So, excuse me, I need glasses to do this. So, and Muneeb is going to introduce the rest of our panelists. So, Muneeb Akarawusi is an accomplished relationship fundraiser, social justice leader, and certified sustainability practitioner. I hope you tell us more about that. I'm curious about that now. Born and raised in London, England, cultural connection and interest in the African Master of Science and Politics of Asia and Africa and the University of London. Oh my goodness. Business studies and sociology from the University of Surrey. Muneeb had roles in creating structural funding policy for the European Union. He built corporate philanthropy programs for the British Red Cross, connected corporations with diversity strategies by supporting recruitment strategies for disabled people, developed and implemented philanthropy strategy for the YMCA of Greater Toronto, supported community engagement strategies with Pathways to Education Canada, where you're currently the Director of Leadership Giving, is that correct? Great. He's also, I don't know how he has the time, is also a board member of Save the Mothers, an international organization committed to partnerships promoting health and dignity of mothers and children in developing countries through education. So Muneeb, very proud to have you with us today. Thank you so much for moderating. I'm going to hand it over to Muneeb.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this session. And thank you also, Emma, for that lovely introduction. Some of those accomplishments you state are actually true. So if you were looking for an interesting and vibrant, informative, and educational discussion on faith and philanthropy, I have a treat for you. You are in the right place, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about our illustrious panel in a moment and introduce them to you. But before I do that, just want to spend maybe a minute or two reflecting on the role of faith in philanthropy. It isn't something that we speak about much, certainly of my limited exposure to the philanthropic debate here in Toronto. It isn't something that comes up much in discussion, either from a fundraising perspective in the organizations that I've been in, or even amongst my colleagues. However, I was really surprised at just how important a role faith and philanthropy plays in building the fabric, the philanthropic fabric and the social fabric of our city, and no doubt the country as well. Statistics Canada research indicates that churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples are the biggest beneficiaries of philanthropy in the country. Of all the donations that were eligible for a tax receipt, roughly 40% of those donations went to faith-based groups. So what we're really talking about here is a huge resource of revenue, a real intent by members of the public to support faith-based groups. And yet, I don't know if you're like me, but if you are, we don't really know much about it, and we don't speak about it anywhere near as much as I feel we should. Another stat is that a person's religious affiliation actually makes them more disposed to giving. So you are more likely to be a donor if you actually have a religious faith, or if you follow and adhere to a religious faith. I think these are some really interesting issues, which we've assembled a panel here today to really help us understand and dig a little deeper and hopefully impart some words of wisdom and knowledge to us. So those of us who are really interested in learning how we might access and partner faith-based groups in a collective way so that our community can become stronger. So let me talk a little bit about the format of our dialogue today. I'm going to share a bit about our illustrious panel in a moment, but I'll also pose some questions. Now, for each question I pose to one of the panelists, they'll answer. But I'm also going to give you an opportunity to ask a question to delve a little bit deeper. So we'll have one question from the audience, one question from me, an answer from the panel, a question from the audience. Is everyone with me so far? And we'll do that a few times. And then at the end, we'll have an open discussion, an open Q&A for you to ask any other questions that you feel are really interesting to you and you'd like the perspective of the panel. So, without further ado, let me introduce this mighty fine and wonderful group of religious representatives that we've assembled today to help us really learn and to understand. And it is my great and distinct pleasure to introduce Trish Eppel, Ph.D., who is Advancement Director at Mount Sinai Hospital. Now, before I go into Trish's accomplishments, which are many and varied, I have to say she wins the medal for Hero of the Day today, because on her way to this session from Union Station, she tripped, twisted her ankle, and rolled in here in style in a wheelchair. And I just want to say to you, Trish, thank you for joining us. And as well as Trish being a hero in my book, certainly, and I'm sure in yours too, she has a deep understanding of the culture of the Jewish philanthropy and a practical appreciation of the challenges of communal sustainability in Israel. Trish defended a doctoral degree on medical science at McMaster University, and while she did this, and I'm beginning to understand a little bit more about you, Trish, she defended her PhD thesis whilst carrying her third child. Wow, what a hero. And then has also spent time in Israel, where she's really, really curious and participating in really trying to understand the ever-evolving Jewish narrative in that country. So please join me, not only in congratulating Trish for making it here today, but also for her accomplishments. Thank you. Imam Muneeb Nasir sits next to Trish, and Imam Muneeb represents the Islamic community and is president of Olive Tree Foundation. Muneeb is also a well-known Canadian leader, highly respected for his knowledge and involvement in religious and current affairs. He's managing editor of the online website ikra.ca, and Muneeb is an imam at the Majid Toronto and is also a Muslim chaplain at the University of Toronto campus. So please join me also in welcoming Muneeb. Welcome. Dr. Budhendranauth Doobay. Budhendra represents the Hindu community, and he is head of the Vishnu Temple. As if that wasn't busy enough, he is also a vascular surgeon and assistant professor at McMaster University. One of the things that, as I was doing my research, I read up about Budhendra was that he was actually a recipient of the Luminary Award from the University of West Indies. And just want you to join me in also welcoming Budhendra. Welcome. Last, and certainly not least, we have Dr. Brent Hawkes. And Dr. Brent Hawkes represents the community, the Christian community. And he's senior pastor at the Metropolitan Community Church in Toronto. He is also a native of Bath, New Brunswick, and a graduate of Mount Allison University. Dr. Hawkes has received a Master's of Divinity and a Doctorate of Ministry from Trinity College, and also in 2007 was a recipient of the Order of Canada. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brent. So we have quite the panel assembled. And now that we've done the introductions and you know who we have speaking and representing their various faiths, why don't we get started? And before we get started, I'm going to just say that one of the caveats of us really having a great session today is timekeeping. And so Emma is going to be our timekeeper. And just for the panel, when I raise my hand, it is because Emma has raised her hand, and the reaction that we hope to get from you is that within 20 seconds you will have wrapped up whatever it is that you were going to say. So, enough of the officiating. Let's get down to business. I want to kick off with a question, and it's a question, Trish, that I want to pose to you. Could you give us an overview of the faith tradition that you represent and describe what fundraising looks like within the Jewish community?
Thanks very much. I'm really delighted to be here. I will come back a little later and make sure that, oh, beg your pardon, there we go. I will come back to you a little later. I'm a little intrigued actually what brought you through this particular door. I have some ideas and I have framed my response with these ideas in my head. I'll check in with you a little later to make sure I've covered them off. Charity sometimes does begin at home, but it always begins with an annoying phone call. But in our house, in a Jewish home, we can actually refuse to take that call because what is in our DNA as Jews is not about charity. It's actually about a concept called tzedakah. And tzedakah is so much rooted in the Jewish ethos that it defines everything about it. It is the thing that guides us. It is about philanthropy, but it's in the context of justice and repairing the world, which is why you're going to hear me talk with action in my sentences. It's about many formats. It comes from a Hebrew word, but T-Z-E-D-D-A-C-K-A will do for now. It's a fundamental, it's in the DNA, and it really defines every action. That is the first thing that you should know about the Jewish community. There is this in our DNA. It defines our community building, our moving into when things are not working in the world. It tells you why the 50% of the top donors to the Buffett Foundation or the Gates Foundation are Jews, and that is the way we operate. It overviews the gamut of everything that we do. The second piece I want you to understand is about this fact that the Jews have been a community on the move, always in response to historical fact. And therefore, we have honed the skills of building and rebuilding and rebuilding and putting in place the institutions that we have needed. The last thing that has come out of this has been a very pragmatic, never mind Nike, we have just do it. Just get on with it. And while you may think we are a people who cogitate over the small meanings of words, in fact, we very quickly get on with the job of what we have to do in the context of tzedakah and repairing the world. I think that's enough just to give you at this point. I would just like to end with the fact that for me, the faith bit didn't resonate because the discussion isn't around faith. It is actually around community building. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Muneeb.
Just to begin with from the religious perspective as well. Charity, altruism, and giving are embedded in the Muslim faith tradition. The Muslims look at every good deed as a charity. And to attain sort of a spiritual station, one must give what you love most. But very similar to the Jewish community as well, we have an obligatory charity that's called Zakat, Z-A-K-A-T, which is a yearly charity. It is one of the pillars of the faith, which Muslims are obligated to give every year. It's 2.5% of your excess wealth. So this charity is something that Muslims give, which means that Muslims are predisposed to giving every year. And the charity is very much, very organized, in the sense that the recipients are defined as well. So, this predisposes Muslims to be very charitable in their giving. But beyond the Zakat charity, Muslims also give. And one of the concepts within the religion that drives Muslims to give is the concept of enduring charity. Because Muslims believe in afterlife. And any charity that's given to sustain, let's say, a school where people are deriving benefit will then go to the register of the donor in the afterlife. So we look at this concept as an enduring charity, as a legacy. There are also certain times of the year that Muslims tend to give much more, and this is during the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. And this is a very, very generous time for Muslims. Most of the giving throughout the year happens during this month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. But there are also other times of the years where Muslims give, and this is the commemoration of the sacrifice of Abraham, where we are expected to give in charity. So during the high holiday seasons, Muslims tend to give as well. So the faith tradition really drives Muslims to give. It defines their giving patterns.
Thank you, Muneeb. So, Budhendra, we've heard about the sadaqah and from the Jewish community, the zakat from the Islamic community. Tell us a bit about how philanthropy is shown and demonstrated in the Hindu community.
Hindus love to eat and don't give in many places. They go to the temple, 90% would eat and don't give, but a lot of Hindus give. And when Hindus give, they give big. And what we suffer from in the Hindu community is donor fatigue. We go to the same people day in and day out. And we have big philanthropists. We have people who have given, I raised money for a chair in McMaster University, purely from the Hindu community, from one individual. He also gave the University of Guelph, and we feel that giving must not only be within the Hindu community, but it must be to the community at large. For example, we have built a monument for the fallen Canadian soldiers, which is the only monument by a non-governmental body. Because in our opinion, we feel that giving not only to build temples and bring in idols and bring in all these sort of things, but also to give for this type of thing where you can go into the mainstream. Also, we have a dialysis clinic in Guyana where we are giving dialysis to people. So these are people in the Hindu community, people give if they trust the person collecting the money. Simple. A lot of thieves around the place who collect money. So if they trust the person, if they trust the individual, and one way I find of giving, of asking for money, is to put your money first. When I start to beg, I put my money first, others then follow. And I find that very successfully in our community. And the community will give for good causes. If it's for medical causes, disasters, they rise to the occasion. We gave hundreds of thousands of dollars for the tsunami, things like this. There were floods in Pakistan, India, all over, Guyana. So they are much more giving when it is due to a specific disaster. But they do give. Some of them will never give, like in all faiths, and some will give. And those who give, you go to them all the time.
Thank you, Budhendra. Brent, your perspective, please.
Excuse my pronunciation, but in the Jewish tradition with tzedakah, and the Islamic tradition with zakat, and the Christian tradition we have guilt. The good news, it works in the short term. The challenging news in the Christian tradition is the dramatic decline of the Christian tradition in North America. Christianity is dramatically declining as a percent of the population. Not their interest in religion, not the broader population's interest in religion. Reg Bibby just did a report that said Canadians are very open to religion. They just don't trust the delivery system, churches. And many churches are on decline because of that. And so that's a challenging situation. And when you couple that with most Christian churches are in older buildings in disrepair, the good news is there's lots of opportunity in terms of increasing the giving and supporting the renovations of our building. Christianity has a variety of different branches, and depending on those branches of Christianity, it's a different approach to giving. And so you can't treat all Christian churches as one type in terms of how you approach giving. We have the situation of the Roman Catholic Church, which relies on a lot of people giving a little, and the Pentecostal churches who rely on a few people giving a lot, and then the rest of us envying both of them. in terms of the amount of money that they're able to raise. We say often that in order to grow a church, it's like a three-legged milk stool, and you need all three legs, and if one of them's short, it'll fall over. And those three legs are facilities, finances, and volunteers. And most faith communities have some kind of facility, probably in disrepair. They probably do a very poor job of managing volunteers and supporting volunteers, engaging volunteers. We're very blessed at our church to have some great folks doing that. And the third area is in finances, and where a lot of our faith communities need a lot of help. Christian giving is traditionally through two methods. One, the offering plate that's passed on Sundays, or pledges that are related to that, to cover the basic operations of the local church. And secondly, project funding, which is a key giving in most faith traditions, to raise money to fix a building, buy an organ, to send money to international causes, etc. So in terms of fundraising, help is needed in both of those areas. Regular giving to cover the core costs, but also special project giving. And in many Christian churches, a huge percentage of the income comes in the last 2 months of the year, as you approach the Christmas season and end of year. So fundraising focused around those last 2 months of the year are crucially important.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you. Wow. So my takeaway from what you were saying really is that there is a very strong culture of giving amongst the four faiths that are represented through our panel today. But I want to put a question to the audience. Well, my question is, do you have a question for our panel? Is there something that is really causing you to think about what you may have heard so far? I'm also acting as Emma while she's acted out of the room.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the panelists could give us some insight into how to ask the different faith communities. I'm with the United Church of Canada. We're supported by many groups. Certainly all the groups represented today support the mission that I work at. But our appeals, I think, are broad-based and not specific to, say, the Muslim community or the Hindu community or the Jewish community. Is there something, advice or a tip maybe that you could give us that would maybe help us better engage your faith communities?
Thank you. And your name is Ron, and you're from downtown Mission, Windsor. Okay, over to our panel. Any advice on how to ask?
My tip is that if you have a cause, and we have done this many times in our temple, and you bring the cause to the table and let them know, they will give. But the cause is the most important and driving factor. If the cause, and they see a need for the cause, I think not only the Hindu community, but all communities should. Because when we collect money for disaster, we don't collect money only from the Hindu community, we collect money across the board. For the war monument, across the board, everything. So we have all sorts of people giving money.
Brent.
Yeah, I think there's a tension between accessing donors and faith communities that are trying to protect their lists, so that organizations like yours that are outside local churches would have a hard time accessing donor lists or donors because churches want to protect them. So I think that one of the ways to do that is to approach churches directly and ask for church sponsorship of the initiative. And that way, individuals can give to their church, and the church protects that list, but then the church gives to the organization. And making an annual commitment to that, I think, is one way to do that. And it also then educates the congregation about the initiative, and then, as you build that relationship, individuals might give directly. But I think that that's probably the way to do it. Many Christian churches love to pick some social justice issues that they're supportive of, and usually one or two that are the key ones. But the key with that is not just to ask for money, but to ask for their engagement with the organization. And so I would suggest that when you're approaching a church, that you approach them with the perspective, yes, we would like some money, but we would also like some volunteers to help and to be involved. One of the theories that I have is that money always follows time. And so if your first initiative is to get people involved with the organization, the money will follow them. If you impress them with the work you're doing and how you say thank you, they're more likely to be generous. But if you're going, first of all, just to ask for money, that's tougher. And so think of asking for both money and involvement, and going through the church, I think, would be a good way to do that.
Muneeb, how to ask in the Islamic community?
Well, I think I just echo Brent's point. I think you network with a specific organization or mosque on the issue that you're, especially if it's, I know faith communities, basically faith communities, are involved in some social justice issues, poverty, homelessness, these issues. Recently, I think 2 weeks ago, I saw Habitat for Humanity Interfaith build of next year, 2015. Islamic Relief, which is one of the main relief agencies in this country, is matching the donations. So that's sort of a partnership that they have made with Habitat for Humanity. And they're bringing in the Muslim community in that process. Recently as well, the organization I'm involved in, Olive Tree Foundation, we are funding Faith and Common Good for a project that they are involved in. So we are establishing this partnership. And through these partnerships, you're accessing, they're getting access to our community, and we are broadening our community as well to support general causes.
I'll just say a few words. One of the joys of working in the Jewish community is we haven't often have to write the case study. We're starting with people halfway up the ladder and we're really developing business plans and marketing plans. So I hope you understand that. The causes that we espouse, people are already on board with them. I agree with the panelists that it won't, engaging the Jewish community, it will be on some third-party project that you are working on and bringing on the Jewish community. So that's a matter of building consensus that way. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to move us on a little bit and ask a question around the joys and, if you like, the pitfalls of fundraising in your individual communities. And Brent, I'm looking at you because you're smiling, and I feel that you have an interesting story to share with us. Over to you.
Yeah, quick story. A few years ago, I was on a panel for the American Marketing Association talking about how major nonprofits have to engage volunteers, that's the future, that they're no longer going to be able to drive their organization solely with staff. And afterwards, two women came to me from one of the major banks, and they said, would you come and talk to our vice president who oversees the work we do with churches? And you'll get lunch. I said, lunch? Yes. And so I went and spoke to the vice president. We had the three of us had a long conversation around churches and working with churches. And then she said to me, we have about 20 frontline staff who work with churches. Now, we know how to do a business plan for an individual. We know how to do a business plan for a business. But we don't know how to work with churches, because they'll come to us and ask for money to fix their building, buy an organ, et cetera, and they have no business sense. They have no one on their board that has a business sense. The clergy don't know what they're talking about in terms of putting together a business plan. And how do we help churches to grow? So the irony, here they come to a church that's historically known as a gay church, and asking us to teach bankers how to help churches to grow. So it was quite an interesting irony. But we did, and we spent 2 hours with their frontline folks talking about helping churches to grow. I think that some of the joys and challenges within the Christian community, challenges are Christian churches are very bad at saying thank you. We take the offering plate that's passed around each Sunday, deposit the money, pay the bills, and move on to the other things we need to do, and do a very poor job generally in terms of donor development. How do you help people to grow? What information do they need, et cetera? So we do a very, very poor job. There's a real tension in the Christian community about recognition. Do you recognize? Do you thank? Do you put a plaque up? Those kinds of things. We have to get over our nervousness about it because it's crucial, especially major donor development. But that's a tension in the Christian community. And generally the lack of fundraising experience. Most Christian churches don't have stewardship committees, don't have anybody on staff who's working on giving. They just pass the plate Sunday after Sunday. And so there's a real challenge there in terms of fundraising expertise.
Thanks for sharing that, Brent. Budhendra, joys and challenges of fundraising in the Hindu community.
The joys are that when I see a potential donor who I know I can get big money from, I give him the front seat. I give him the most honored seat, and I see how what a great person he is, and I know money will come. Those are the joys. Another pitfall is that when like for example, if like a big dignitary is visiting or presenting an award or something, I will invite an individual who I think will give me money. And I said, I'm going to, let us say, for example, I introduce you to the Prime Minister. Will you give me $100,000? He said, yes. So when he came, and I about to introduce him, I said, "You walk with a check?" He said, "No, I'll bring the check for you on Sunday." So I introduced him. He took a photograph. Sunday came, he never came. Another Sunday come, he never comes. So the pitfalls are sometimes you get, I don't want to use that word here, but then sometimes you get disappointed when you think that you're about to get it, and then, so they're the joys and the pitfall. But if you, what the Reverend was saying, you must have good relationship with your bank, and your books must be in order. And also, government helps us in a lot of ways. The Trillium grant, federal grant, provincial grant, all these are the joys of getting sometimes. It all comes to trust and whether you are doing a good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Muneeb.
I think, the Muslim community is a new immigrant community. So one of the challenges of new immigrant communities is that they tend to support projects in their home countries. They tend to spend most of their monies outside to religious causes, or they spend the monies building institutions here, the mosques, the schools, the community centers. And this is a natural progression of most immigrants. In the first few years, the first few decades of their lives here, they tend to build their institutions, and then they start giving and becoming more accustomed to giving to general causes. The other challenge is that the same thing that Brent is speaking of, is that people don't like to be recognized. And within the Muslim faith tradition, giving anonymously is sort of highly regarded. So people want to give anonymously. They don't want their donations to be revealed. They feel that it's to be done sincerely to please God, and it should not be done to gain praise or to gain recognition from others. However, this is changing. And this is changing because of a number of circumstances affecting the Muslim community over the last few years. Recently, because of the perception among the general population that Muslims are not integrating well into the Canadian population, or they're not adopting so-called Canadian values, the leaders in the community have been encouraging their donors and their big donors, for example, to give and give publicly. Recently, 2 weeks ago, two business leaders in the Muslim community, they gave $1 million, or they started a fund for $1 million in a mosque to support veterans. Generally they would not have done this previously, but over the last few years, the community has been seeing that people are regarding the community as being outsiders. So now Muslims are being encouraged to give and give publicly. And this was just one example of them, revealing their donations. There's some joys as well. When people give selflessly and joyously in their faith tradition, we believe that they attain a higher spiritual station. We are taught that you attain righteousness by giving what you love most. By giving what you love most. And people also in faith communities, they strengthen their fellowship and they strengthen their relationships with each other when they give and come together and work for a project. So I think this is one of the joys that faith communities have. That we sort of celebrate when we are able to achieve a project, whether it's a faith-based project or in the general community.
Thank you. Jewish giving is not as a precondition for a place in the afterlife. It is about building community, repairing the world now. I say that Jewish giving is not about banking something for the future. And I think perhaps our understanding in our community about having things named after philanthropists, it may be a little bit different for that, because the conversations I have with major givers is about acting as a role model. So if you go up and down University Avenue and see all those names, these people actually, you'll be surprised, who hand over $10 and $20 million, they actually don't have egos. It's about understanding their role in the community to better Toronto, to better Canada, and acting as that role model for people with whom they interact. So it's a slightly different tone of that, and it's not done in that religious context of, I'm banking something, so when I go through the gates eventually, they'll look at that. So that was one thing I just want to do in contradistinction. The challenges for the Jewish community, we have gone through a rough historical context, And as the young generation remove themselves from the emotional impact of what has gone on with the Jewish people, they become less engaged in terms of building institutions. They now live in a very safe country in Canada. They can walk into any institution. I work at Mount Sinai Hospital. That hospital exists because Jewish doctors and Jewish doctors could not find positions elsewhere when they came to Canada. So they built their own hospital, and so it goes. Those preconditions don't exist anymore. So our challenge as a Jewish community is, what do we do for this young generation of Jews? Two things I'll just say before I put down the microphone. They are becoming involved in philanthropy in terms of entrepreneurship. So there are many organizations like the United Jewish Appeal and even Mount Sinai that actually has programs where the young donors themselves become engaged in how that money is spent. Yes, it means a ton of stewarding and a ton of looking after, but that's how we bring them in. The case alone is not sufficient for them anymore. I think I've a ton to say, but I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trish. So I've heard about the, in some communities, giving money back home. In other communities, the need to build capacity within particular faith groups so that they are better prepared to engage in fundraising. The need to thank, the need to follow up when people make promises. And also heard that actually philanthropy can be a response to challenges that a particular faith community has experienced. And I wonder from the audience whether there are any questions around what is being heard. Yeah.
We speak of charity via faith. I've heard from the Jewish community that that's becoming less and less. We have the Muslim community, we have the Hindu community, and we have the Christian community. Has anyone thought of rising above all of this and removing the faith and becoming more of a humanitarian community? Because a lot of questions are usually asked, where does my dollar go? And that's a very important thing. So I would suggest a next step is to rise above, using the same values, but coming together.
Okay, thank you for that question. So, breaking down some of the perceived barriers and working laterally to build communities. What are some of your thoughts? Let me start with you, Budhendra.
I've alluded to rising above the faith and going into the mainstream. I spoke about the building of the monument for the soldiers, fallen soldiers, having interfaith dialogue to see how we can make Canada a better place. And I think interfaith dialogue is one of the most, a very important thing in bringing people together, to foster good brotherhood among the faith community. And this thing about rising above the faith group is, most of us are doing it. I don't think any one of us are confining ourselves to our faith who are here. We rise above that, and we try to do that also.
Okay, thank you. Brent?
I have some thoughts.
Trish?
As per usual, I have some thoughts. I'm going to talk about this in terms of strategy, whether asking people to buy in for some neutral project or some neutral ideal, whether that works as a strategy only. And I have to say, I believe that the strength of Canada comes from the fact that it is actually a multicultural society. And the idea that the government had under Trudeau and seeping down was that there is an inherent strength in community because we understand each other's language, we're comfortable with each other, that allows projects to get off the ground. And I worry, as a strategy only, whether pulling that apart will get us further ahead. I personally believe no, because the proof is in the pudding. We have Canada.
Thank you, thank you. we're going to have one question after my questions, and then lots of questions after the panel has answered my questions. So please, for those of you that we are not able to get the microphone to, please hold on to your questions, write them down, because you are going to get an opportunity. So my next question then is for the room, which, how many of us are fundraisers in the room? Just by show of hands, please. The vast majority, I would say, of us are fundraisers. So question to the panel then, what advice would you give us as fundraisers about how to, and I think, sorry, I've forgotten your name, Ron. Ron was alluding to this in terms of really seeking advice about how to get into or really work collaboratively with each faith group. And I wonder if we can go back to that question and really talk about, I guess, two things that Brent could do, Ron, could do tomorrow that are really going to help him understand more and feel equipped. And Budhendra, you're looking at me, I'm looking at you. I feel you have something to say on this again.
The cause is the most important thing. Why you want this money. You are from the United Church, right? So you don't have a specific faith as such? Oh, you work for the United Church. Okay.
I'm going to interrupt you, Budhendra, if I may, because what I think Ron is looking for is, what can he do tomorrow? So he has his cause, he knows what it is. What should he do when he gets back into the office tomorrow? First two steps.
You make a list of people who you think you can get money from, who you know who have given to you before, and you go and tell them, I know that I've been badgering you before, but you know, this is what I have to do. And do you know of anyone else who can help me? If you can you got a network. Money don't come like this. You got a network with people. They have to, and what you have to do, that's the question. Go in your office, get a list of people who have given you money before, tackle them. The Christmas is coming. Give some more money. And do you have any people or any other names who you think I can call? Or you call them and I call them. That works a lot actually, because I don't think by putting it in the papers, by printing leaflets, by handing out leaflets, you are going to get money. Money comes when people believe in you, and if the older donors, the donors who you had before, would have believed in you. So you tackle them first, ask them to get like-minded people who you can call, talk to them. You got to talk to them, and you got to beg. And you know, you must never ever think that you are too big to beg. You got to beg and beg and beg again.
Budhendra, thank you. Trish.
Philanthropy is a highly professionalized enterprise. It demands the same rules of accountability. It demands the same professional interactions. It demands the development of the same case study, marketing skills. Begging doesn't sit. It doesn't work when you go into a store. It doesn't work when you go into a hospital. We cannot assume that it's going to work in the philanthropic world. We've got to stand above that. This is actually my words of advice, is to elevate what we do so that it has a standard of excellence at every point. So I'm going to disagree with you on that point.
Thank you, Trish. But before you put the microphone down.
Before you disagree with me, I have raised millions of dollars by begging.
I'll meet you dollar for dollar on that.
Wow. Okay. So
that is typical.
So I feel I have to step in for the benefit of world peace here. But I'm going to give you that word, Budhendra, but I want to come back to you, Trish, because I'm seeking two bits of advice. What should be done?
Who, me?
No, I felt you wanted to reply.
No, I think that begging don't mean you go with a bowl. It's not demeaning the word begging. Begging means you're asking, and you're telling me what your project is, what you want to do, where you've got money for, where am I going to go with this, what can this project, how can this project benefit A, B, C, or D? And that the word begging here may be, you might just taking as a loose word, we're going with your with a bag and begging like a bag lady. No, as a matter of fact, bag ladies get a lot of money. So you go and you tell them, convince them, show them what you can do, show them what you have done. It's not what you can do, but what you have done. And when you show them what you have done, you beg, B-E-G, you beg, and you're going to get your money.
Thank you, Budhendra. Now, Trish, back to you. Ron wants to know how he can access the Jewish community for some of the causes that his organization represents. What should he do tomorrow?
Okay, so I'm assuming we're under the dome because I'm going to be open here. The Jewish community's agenda is, in general, so large that it exhausts virtually everybody in that community, making sure that we repair our own world. We are nearly there, but there's an awful lot of work that we feel we have to do, and it relates primarily actually to the generations yet to come who are not buying into Jewish education, who are not espousing Jewish causes. And we believe in these causes because we believe from our perspective that they better the world and there is effects for humanity in general. It's going to be a challenge. I think your impact is going to be on a one-on-one basis, somebody that you've made, in terms of embracing the whole Jewish community and bringing them on board. I'm being honest, not at this point in time.
Thank you. Muneeb.
I think the question, is how do you gain access to the Muslim community to raise monies? We alluded to it previously, to identify a partner in the community. And this is quite important, especially for newer immigrant communities, because they don't have the cultural competency as yet. And to sort of establish a partnership with a mosque or a community association can be beneficial. And I'll give you some examples. Some of the suburban cities have been doing fairly well, especially the hospital foundations. In Brampton, the Brampton Civic Hospital, did a fairly extensive fundraising in the Sikh, Hindu, Muslim community. And they actually established, in the case of the Muslims, the Muslim Friends of Oslo. And the Muslim Friends of Oslo raised $1 million for the hospital. And the same is the case with the Sikh and Hindus. The same is happening in Etobicoke. The Muslim Friends of Humber River is raising, I think, $250,000 for the Humber River Hospital. The same happened in Stouffville, where there is $2 million. So, they have established this connection with the community for a project to support the hospital. The second point I can say is that you need to spend some time educating yourself about the community and educating the community about the project. And this requires to be inclusive and not just simply have numerical numbers or nominal people on your boards and committees. It means including the people in your community on your committees, engaging them. Because what's happening a great deal in many parts of the city of Toronto is that, especially for the visible minority communities, we are not on the boards or on the committees. And we don't have that input into sort of driving the agenda. The other thing is that you have to be very culturally specific. I know in the case, once again, of the William Osler Center, what they've been doing is not having galas. They've been having Diwali celebrations, Eid celebrations, specific for that community. So they access the community through the high holiday seasons. They organize events around that. But the final point I want to make is that I think faith communities have a golden opportunity, and I agree with Dr. Doobay here, in interfaith and intercultural dialogue. I think there is a golden opportunity now for interfaith and faith communities to come together on shared projects. And I think over the last few years, I've seen that there's a lot more appetite for this, especially the social justice projects. The United Church, the Muslim community, the Hindu community can come together actually and work on specific projects. And I mentioned Habitat for Humanity, and there are a few others like this that can happen. It may not be very big projects, but it starts the process of inclusion for the community.
Budhendra, before we hear from you, I do want to give Brent an opportunity, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay.
I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently. Instead of answering the question about how do you access the Christian community to get money from the Christian community, I'm going to answer it in terms of how do you access the Christian community to get business. in the Christian community. And I think there it's to work through denominations and conferences, to be able to go to conferences and be able to say you want to do some workshops on fundraising, project fundraising, annual giving campaigns, et cetera. To do that and to offer those kinds of resources at conferences, and through that means being able then to get businesses with local faith communities who need help, whether it's hiring you to do some fundraising for a specific project, a building campaign, a capital campaign, or annual giving campaigns, to work with those. Secondly, if you really want to learn how to improve giving in the Christian community, learn from the fundamentalists. I'm probably the last person to say that, but however, they have perfected volunteer management and fundraising. And they're growing, in my opinion, in spite of their theology. But one of the reasons why they are growing is they're really engaging people in the life of those communities in very active ways, and therefore then they will become generous givers. And they're not shy about talking about money. They're very aggressive and assertive at talking about money, so they have those resources. And so fundamentalists have a lot of conferences, and in those conferences they have different workshops, and you can go there. You know, for years it was all the fundamentalists and me. It was not very comfortable, but I learned a lot from what they're doing and in their conferences and on their websites about how to perfect fundraising within a community.
Thank you, Brent. Before we go to the audience, Budhendra.
I just want to echo what Muneeb said. Like during Diwali, for example, Mississauga, Trillium Hospital, they've raised millions of dollars. Every year they raise, for this last year, $700-something thousand. And Ron, is it? If you could talk to the people who are organizers of the Trillium Foundation, the Diwali, I'm sure they could give you some help. And I agree with you that the high holidays are the best time for these things.
Thank you, thank you. So I've heard cause, I've heard collaboration, building that connection, being inclusive. Really want to thank you for those really great bits of advice you've provided to us in terms of how to work with your communities. Questions from the audience?
All right, we haven't gone to the back yet. Let's take a stroll. Don't want to leave you guys out.
Hi, my name is Nancy. I work at Sick Kids Foundation. Just a question, Brent, you and I had actually chatted about this previously, about how Metropolitan Community Church is actually was born out of Christian people being excluded from other areas of Christianity. Can you speak a little bit about how, despite that, or in lieu of that, you've also been successful in rallying support for your specific organization, and how we as charities that aren't necessarily working in the religious space can maybe learn from that?
Yeah, I think our involvement with social justice activities have really given our church a profile in the broader community and have brought us front of mind to people. Whether that's fighting for gay marriage, fighting for inclusion in the Human Rights Code, whether when I did Jack Layton's funeral, a huge profile. And so we strongly believe that social justice and involving our congregation in social justice issues of a variety of kinds is key to engaging and key to catching the minds of the community. It's also key in terms of our experience is younger people want to find a faith community that's not just about themselves, but it's also about repairing the world. That's also about getting active in social justice issues. The other thing is, my doctoral thesis is on church growth principles. What are the key factors that help churches to grow? I'm very concerned about the future of North America without vibrant faith communities. And I think vibrant faith communities are a wonderful contribution, not organizations that are trying to legislate morality and deny women the right to choose and all kinds of other things, but vibrant faith communities that are helping people with values and principles and teaching young people how to cope with life, how to get over difficult times, supporting each other, be generous, be involved. I think those kinds of institutions are extremely valuable and needed for the future of our society. Unfortunately, that's not the direction we're heading, so we have to try to turn that around, and having the financial resources is key to that. Does that help, Nancy, in terms of, okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Brent, and thanks, Nancy, for asking that question. So our agenda actually dictates that I ask the panel another question. But I figure that since I'm the one holding the clipboard, I can subvert that. More questions from the audience. Emma, can you help, please? And Christina. Christina has been very patient. Thank you.
I want to make a comment and a question, but I'll keep my comment short. So I represent Catholics in southern Saskatchewan, and I work for the Archbishop there. And I just wanted to respond a little bit to guilt, and I would like to share the word stewardship and the tradition of stewardship, the story of the good steward. I receive what I have, and how I use what I have is important to God. So I just want to... I know Catholics get the blame for a lot of the guilt, but we are talking about stewardship in southern Saskatchewan. And I just wanted to say that from my perspective, I think I heard this word begging, and I want to use the word inviting. And that's a very Christian word, but I think we're thinking of the same thing. Because when we think about how Jesus built what Christianity is today, a lot of people came to see, but Jesus always said, come in further, get to know more, let me invite you. And I think that works very well with fundraising. And I think something that everyone in the room should understand is in the way that fundraising is matching values with values and values with actions. I think that is for the faith communities as well. And I would say, speaking on behalf of Catholicism, our value is about come and see, and then let me invite. Get deeper, get further. Where are you? And we invite and invite and invite and invite. So I liked what you were saying about the begging, the reaching out personally, but I use the word invite. The question that I have is, how, when, and who talks about giving specifically during religious services?
So, okay.
I think that was pretty clear.
Thank you, Christina. I want to talk about this point around begging, because I think I understand what Budhendra is saying, and I think about the African community as well, where actually I would say there are two platforms for giving. And begging in the Western context, I think is a very kind of loaded and quite heavy word. But unless you are seeing people on the street who are homeless and are able to stop and put your hand in your pocket and give, then I think we remain backward as a society, and those people could very well be begging. And then we go back to what Trish is saying, that there are highly sophisticated platforms for us to make philanthropic donations, more considered donations. And I think that this is what Budhendra is referring to, that at every point we have an opportunity to respond to those who beg, but within that there is deeper within the Hindu tradition a responsibility to give in a more considered way. So the question then, and remind me, sorry, I got caught up in my own.
How, when, who talks about money, like donating money during the specific religious service? So during the prayer time in the temple, the mosque, the church, who gets up and talks to the community during that religious service?
Brent.
Yeah, two comments. First, my comment about guilt was a joke. It was not meant to be serious. And secondly, in terms of who, how, when in religious ceremonies, historically it's been me, and that's been a mistake. What we've learned in terms of the literature and our own experience is that it's much more effective when it's a member of the congregation who tells their story. And it's important to remember, people don't give to churches. People give to visions, right? Yeah, or to people, or to real life situations. And so I think that the more it can be about, a wonderful church in San Francisco is called Glide Memorial Church. It's a United Methodist church, one of the largest, and does a a lot of social justice stuff. And every Sunday in their service, when it comes time for the offering, someone gets up and tells their story. And then they say, oh, okay, and by the way, the offering plates are coming. They don't make a pitch. They tell the story about how the church is changing people's lives. And so churches don't do a great job. Many churches don't do a great job of that. They leave it to the presider at that point in the service to make the pitch. I think that's a mistake. And I think it needs to be much more about telling the story, about how the church is touching lives, and then let people give, because they will respond to that and give to that.
Thank you, Brent. Budhendra, how, when does giving take effect within, say, a Hindu religious ceremony?
Within the Hindu religious ceremony, the man who's doing the ceremony. he has the people's attention, and maybe what Brent is saying, that in his way, someone can stand up and give a story, but someone we have not tried that out, but people would listen mostly to the person who is el numero uno.
Mm-hmm. And
to him.
Who is that numero uno, as you described him? Who is the person who leads the ceremony?
The person who is commanded, who is like giving the sermon, who is on the pulpit, who is in charge of the temple.
A priest?
A priest.
Okay.
And if not, if he is not capable, then the president of the temple, who is the person, is the person who the people look up to. That's what it comes down to. Who they look up to the most, that person is the one that is going to get a response.
Okay, great. Thank you, Budhendra. How does it work within the mosque, Muneeb?
Well, the mosque is, if you've ever been into a mosque or a fundraising dinner in the Muslim community, it's quite an interesting experience. It's a very communal affair. And usually it's the imam, or we have developed over the last number of years fundraisers in the community who are very good motivational speakers. And they have become known as fundraisers in the community. They have the credibility, the trust of the people. And they're invited to do fundraising on behalf of a community. Usually, most of the fundraising tends to happen at certain specific times of the year. During the month of fasting, Muslims believe that the reward that they get will be greater. So you have a lot of fundraising happening during the month of fasting, where people attend the mosque every single day, every single night. So millions, tens of millions of dollars are raised in communities here during that month. Yes.
The month of Ramadan is the month I feel you're talking about. And what exactly is that month?
It's the month of fasting where Muslims are required to fast during the daylight hours for 1 month.
June and July?
It varies. It's on a lunar calendar. So this year it was around July.
Okay.
July, August. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Muneeb. Trish?
Thank you. I'm going to divide this into 3 parts. The first is on the religious and the synagogue. That can be done by the rabbi or the president, especially around Yomim Narim, which is the High Holy Days, the fasting of Yom Kippur, because it says in that text that if you give tzedakah, charity, in fact, your life is going to be much better next year. So it's built into the liturgy. The second piece is all Jewish communities in North America have a United Jewish Appeal, much like the United Way. Toronto has, its community can raise $60 to $70 million a year just in terms of this annual campaign. There are levels of giving, etc., but that's understood, that is your Jewish tax, in order to keep the infrastructure of Jewish community alive, schools, social services, whatever else. The third, and some place I've been heavily involved in, is in the capital campaigns. And what the Jewish community has brought in for the capital campaigns, for example, to build new campuses, new facilities, is very high-skilled members of that steering committee who are very selectively chosen because they can talk to the right people. We're talking here about bringing in tens of millions of dollars. So that's a different sort of level of ask, and they're doing it with the people that they do business with. So I would say those are the 3 segments of Jewish giving in Toronto.
Okay, thank you. That's for you to keep. Thank you. Okay. One more question, and then I'm going to have to refer back to my clipboard. And I know you've been waiting patiently, Julie. We'll come to you in a few moments.
Hi there. This is a bit of a big picture question. My name is Suzanne, and I work at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and I also teach a course in fundraising at Ryerson. I was raised outside of faith traditions. I've always worked for very secular charities. And as I've been doing my work at Ryerson, meeting with more of the students and really spending time researching where so many of our sort of secular philanthropic tendencies come from, I see them so rooted in faith traditions. I can't find a practice that isn't coming from a faith tradition. So my question is, what have we lost? If there's such a deep connection between faith and spirituality and giving, what are we losing when we talk about giving in purely secular terms?
Thank you. And could I ask our panel, just in the interest of time, to maybe just use 1 or 2 sentences to answer that question? What have we lost? Where has the disconnect come from between faith, society, and giving?
one of the things that I think unites all of us here at the front and most of the world's major religions is the central value of compassion. And I know that folks who are totally secular can be very compassionate. However, all of us come from traditions where on a regular basis it's taught, it's reminded over and over and over again. You know, church, synagogue, mosque, temples are one of the few places in the world that you go on a voluntary basis to be told you need to be different and to be challenged all the time on a regular basis. And I think that's one of the benefits of faith communities, is that challenge all the time to be more generous, to be more engaged, to be more involved. And so I think that one of the things that faith communities bring is that deep, deep value of compassion. And you just have to convince us of the cause. You don't have to convince us to be compassionate. And I know that that's true for many secular people, but I'm not sure that they have that kind of regular commitment and that regular challenge in a consistent way like people in faith communities have.
Thank you.
Since that was more than 2 sentences, I decline.
Yeah, I echo what Brent says. You know, I think the underlying value that religion brings in terms of giving is compassion. You know, loving for others what you love for yourself. I think, you know, regardless of whether a person is religious or secular, this underlying value defines us as human beings.
I'm actually going to question the premise of the question. I think we're in a better place now than we ever have been historically. More people are taken care of. And whether we can trace back the threads of the faith-based motivation, by the way, those concepts have now merged into secular life anyhow. I'm really optimistic and happy about life here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Budhendra, you have a minute and a half to answer the question. Is that enough?
I give it to all the speakers. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
We're just being redundant here.
Okay, thank you. So, final question then. And it's really, I think, something that would be an important question to ask, just based on the fact that we are talking about faith and philanthropy. Question is, what words of wisdom can you draw on to inform our audience about going forward after this great panel discussion today and the great ideas that they have heard? What is a word of wisdom in a sentence or maybe more that they should walk away with from each of your faith groups? Budhendra.
Why you pick on me all the time, man? You have so many people here better than me. What word of wisdom I have is that you beg, and you beg again. And the most important thing is people must have respect for the person who is leading the campaign. And also to know, as someone said, is a dollar going to the right pocket, or 90% is going to be used in administration, as some charities have. And if you could convince them that every single cent of your money is going to go to the charity that you, or the project that you're asking for, it's a very, very important topic, because so many organizations, they have to pay this, they have to pay the other, and by the time the dollar comes down, it's coming to 10 cents. That's one. And secondly is that we, if we can show them that in this project, our aim was so much, we collected so much, we finished the project, publish an audited financial statement, which is not done in very many places, and that is the most important thing, that people can trust you. Trust, confidence, and to show the people the result at the end and no administrative costs. These are the most important things in getting money. Can I leave now?
Yes, yes. And just for our audience, we've been very pleased to have Budhendra join us, but he does have to leave now. So please join me in thanking Budhendra for his marvelous contribution.
At least I don't have to fight with Trish.
What a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Budhendra. Okay, so thank you very much. Words of wisdom. Trish.
I think my final words of wisdom, thank you. I don't want to do that, Jim. Relate to what I would say, whether you're a faith-based organization or not. Philanthropic organizations have to strive for the best that they can be, bring in the right people, pay their staff well, promote themselves. You're all shouting above the crowd, is what we all do. But it's no longer a profession which can pull in people who are just well-meaning and without the skills. I certainly am taking that back from having worked within the Jewish community and in the hospital setting. We've got to be the very best that we can be.
Thank you, Trish.
I want to I'm going to wear my role as an imam in answering this question. You know, charity, I see it as a means. It's a means to help people. It's a means to promote good and to promote the common good. It is not just about collecting monies, but about encouraging people to do good and to foster goodwill among people. So I think this is the underlying value that from my faith tradition that I see in charitable giving. It's not just about collecting the monies, but the end result is that we want to build goodwill among peoples.
Thank you.
I'm going to answer the question in two ways. The first is in terms of what advice would I give if you want to raise money from the Christian community, and that advice would be to remember that money follows time, to really try to start with how can you get people engaged in the project, and then how can you get them to give? Because if they're engaged in the project, they will give more, and they will tell their friends to give more, and people who are engaged are great people to ask others. So that's the first thing I would say. Too often people just come and say, would you give to a project, and take the check and goodbye, and I think that's not the best way. Secondly, what advice would I give if you want to work with the church to help it improve its finances, its fundraising? And that advice would be project funding or special funding is really important, but what's most important is how you convert project funding into regular giving. That's what will have the longest impact on that organization. So if it's a capital campaign and you raise $1 million, how can you convert some of that the next year or the next year into regular giving? And building that regular giving so that faith communities have the core funding they need to grow and expand what they do in their offer. And project funding converting into regular giving is one of the most effective ways to build regular giving. And the third point I want to make is I'm dying to know what the question is that the woman in the third row has been wanting to ask. So,
Julie? Thank you, Brent. Thank you.
It's not that good. It's not that good. Hi, my name is Julie. I work at Mount Sinai Hospital Foundation as an advancement director as well. And I also sit on the Inclusion and Equity Committee with Day for AFP. And in one of our previous sessions, there was a gentleman from the Sikh community who brought up an excellent point about giving within your own community to help build community, but then also making sure that you publicly give in mainstream organizations to help, have that public profile of your community and showing to be a part of the mainstream community. So, as a fundraiser, as a donor, and also working at Mount Sinai, Dr. Hawks, I was just so taken aback to hear how in your community people are so reluctant around recognition. And then, Trish, how you were speaking about it as an active role model and encouraging others to give. So the question that I pose is that in building these vibrant faith communities, is there an advantage for communities to give in mainstream organizations versus building your own strong organizations and churches or mosques or community centers? And then what is the advantage and disadvantage of then putting efforts to publicly give in mainstream organizations?
Yeah, I think that in the gay community, we may have just the opposite problem that the Sikh community has. Because historically, wealthy donors have not wanted to give to gay causes. They've wanted to remain anonymous. They've not wanted to come out. They've not wanted their name associated with something. So historically, it's been about staying in the closet. AIDS began to change that, because when we were faced with huge huge number of people who were dying and a lot of care, and the governments weren't responding. That began the GLBT communities starting to give and to give more publicly, and so it's shifting. I think also in the Christian community there is a reluctance to recognize, and I think that's wrong, and we need to overcome that, and it's changing. And you're seeing, I think it's partly because there's scriptures that say the right hand is not supposed to know what the left hand is giving, and those kinds of things, and so there's been that kind of reluctance. And again, I see it changing. And so the struggle we've had in the gay community is trying to get some of the wealthier donors to give to gay causes. Again, that's shifting, and we see with Casey House's fundraising and some other fundraising that's going on, the 519 fundraising, that people have been willing to put their names. But I would just give an example. The McCain family gave our church $1 million. We never even asked for it. It came out of the blue. They called us one day and said, we want to give you $1 million. And so we knew that as soon as we got that $1 million, this is a little bit of a longer answer. We knew it, but she's been waiting. We knew that as soon as we got that $1 million, our congregation would immediately think, oh, we got a lot of money. We don't need to give. We have all this money. So we went to the McCain family and we said, thank you, and here's what we would like to give it to, and we would like your endorsement of these 6 projects, so that when we announce it to the congregation, we say, we've gotten $1 million for these 6 projects. So it doesn't affect our regular giving. And afterwards, and when it came public, and there was a big article about they giving us $1 million, and Margaret McCain said, they have never received so much positive feedback from friends and relatives and people about that gift. Right? And it kind of opened it up that people were more willing to give. And she compared it to their first major gift to CAMH. That CAMH was having a challenge raising funds for projects that people didn't want to be associated with addiction. And it took a couple of people willing to give and have their names associated with it that opened that floodgates. And so I think recognition is absolutely crucial for that reason as setting a model for giving, as opposed to, and most people, you have to persuade them to be recognized, but it's to our advantage as an organization to do so.
Can I just elaborate? Give you one example then? Sorry, time's over. We have 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to bounce it back to you, Mide.
Okay.
I don't want to cut you off. I just want to make sure I'm going to run out of time.
Okay. Since Julie was waiting. Thank you, Emma. What's your follow-up question?
No, I think that's a perfect example where LGBT organizations can partner with sick kids and raise funds for that. And very seldom have we ever been approached by mainstream organizations who've wanted to raise money for something that would benefit the LGBT community, but it's being raised by that mainstream organization. We've either do it ourselves, or they've done it, we found out about it later. There's been very few of those partnerships ever formed. And I think there's huge potential there.
Okay. Yeah. Already some collaboration happening. I like that. I like that. Muneeb, you were mentioning that within the Islamic community there was perhaps quite a strong tradition of giving back home. And just leading off Julie's question, how do you get that balance between giving to your migrant home, as it were, here, and your home back wherever the Islamic community may come from? How do you get that balance? How do you encourage giving on both sides?
Yeah, I sort of agree with the Muslim community is very much in the same position as the Sikh community, in the sense that they tend to give back to their home causes. And there's some political reasons as well that drives this, and circumstances. The Muslim population around the world is the highest displaced in terms of refugees, homeless people, people who are in need. So a lot of the relief agencies around the world actually access the Muslim community here, who they know are wealthy in North America and in Europe, to support these orphans or refugees in various places. So there's a driving force that pulls the people to donate to these causes. But recently, as I mentioned in a previous comment, the circumstances that the Muslim community faces in Canada today is driving the community to raise their profile. Traditionally, Muslims, and I agree with Brent, that in the religious tradition, we are discouraged from publicly donating. And there's actually a verses in the scriptures that says, it's better if you give, anonymously. But there's also another verse that says, if you give and then encourages others to give, it's better. So, there's these contradicting verses. So Muslims are not accessing these type of scriptures and saying, look, let's give publicly because the community is facing some perception difficulties. We need to raise our profiles. We need to start accessing and doing work here. As far as the comment on projects, I think this is where partnerships can be established. A few years ago, I think the hospital in Scarborough came to our organization. They wanted to do a hospital gang that was a modest hospital gang. And they wanted to access the community to get funding. It was a specific project that they were looking for funding. So if you have specific projects like this that can, you can partner with the community, I think this is where you can raise funds from the community.
Thank you, Muneeb. And Trish, amongst the Jewish community, obviously very strong philanthropy here in the country, and strong affiliations also, I assume, to Israel and other communities around the world where there are strong Jewish communities, shall I say, mixing those verbs up. But what advice do you have? How do you get that balance between giving at home and giving abroad?
By doing both. Thank you. By doing both. And certainly I think that's reflected in the Jewish community. As historical influences emerge, that proportion of giving, say, to Israel, or not only Israel, but communities that are at risk throughout the world, in the Soviet Union and other places, that takes top priority. At the moment, that has diminished, and funds are staying locally because people in the Jewish community woke up and said, a child in need in the Soviet Union is no more or less in need than a child in Canada. So that's what the response is. Also, just finally, the nature of giving, say, to places in the former Soviet Union or in Israel or other places has changed from philanthropy to entrepreneurship. And I've mentioned this form before. It's another outlet, and that engages young people and may have just as much impact at the end of the day if people are given jobs, both in Canada and throughout the world.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you to our panel. This has been, I hope, and certainly for me, amazing, and I hope for you, amazing and rewarding as well. It isn't often, as I said in the beginning, that we have an opportunity as a philanthropic community to address issues of faith, which are so important in driving really, really great work in our communities on many different levels. And I've just have some takeaways. Brent, I loved your point about compassion and how money follows time. That's something that I can remember very, very easily. And I will kind of store in my mind, really, that money indeed does follow time. Get the person involved first, and then start to have that discussion around how financially they may become invested. From Budhendra, this word begging. Certainly, never have I been in a situation where a three-letter word has held so much contention as the word beg. However, I think I understand where he's coming from, which is just to consistently ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. We know that as fundraisers. And Trish, your emphasis on being professional, I think, is deeply, deeply meaningful to all of us. How do we professionalize our fundraising teams? And for me, that also includes representation. I can't remember who on the panel said it, but we have to be able to engage faith communities and people from different ethnic groups in every aspect of our organization, straight from the board, even into our fundraising teams. And I think that's how we get the best integration, the best insights, and the best opportunities for collaboration and engagement. And Muneeb, really great thing I think you did in really distinguishing between philanthropy at home and philanthropy away. And your words about it's not just about the money, but it's about doing good. That's really what we are all about. That's really what drives us. It isn't so much about the money, it's the opportunity to do really great work in a collaborative way. So I really just want to thank you for being such a great and a wonderful panel, and I would like to invite the audience to join me, please.